The last thing I remember of my world was the smoke. It was thick and angry, tasting of burnt pine and terror. It stole the air from my lungs and the sky from my eyes. I remember the screams of my people, the sharp crack of the white men's rifles, the face of my husband, Cale, as he pushed me behind him, his jaw set like stone. Then, a searing pain in my side, a flash of fire that consumed everything, and the world went dark. I was Nalin of the Chiricahua. And in that darkness, I believed I was gone and death, I thought, was a cold, silent place. But what I found was not silence. It was the gentle crackle of a fire. It was not cold, but warm. A heavy warmth lay over me, something rough but soft. I smelled wood smoke, but it was different from the smoke of our fires. It was contained, peaceful. And I smelled something else, coffee, and bacon frying. My body ached with a deep, throbbing memory of pain. I tried to move, but a fire bloomed in my side, fierce and sharp. A groan escaped my lips, a sound I didn't recognize as my own. The sizzling sound stopped. I heard the soft scuff of boots on a wooden floor. I forced my heavy eyelids open. The world was made of wood. A ceiling of thick, dark logs above me. Walls of the same. A small window showed a square of brilliant blue sky. This was not a wickiup. This was a white man's house. Panic, cold and sharp, cut through the fog in my head. I was a prisoner. A man stood in the doorway, a silhouette against the light from another room. He was tall, broad in the shoulders, and held a skillet in one hand. He didn't move, just watched me. I watched him back, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. His face was shadowed, but I could see a thick beard and eyes that were steady. He was a cowboy. I had seen men like him before, from a distance. They were the ones who brought the soldiers, the ones who took the land. They were the enemy. I tried to sit up, to fight, to run, but the pain in my side was a hot knife. I fell back against the soft mattress, gasping. The man took a slow step into the room. He set the skillet down on a small table. He raised his hands, palms open, a gesture I knew was meant to show he was unarmed. "Easy now," he said. His voice was low and quiet, like the rumble of distant thunder. It wasn't the harsh, barking language I had heard from the soldiers. It was gentle. I didn't understand his words, but I understood his tone. Still, I trusted nothing. My hand went to my side, expecting to find the torn deerskin of my dress, the sticky warmth of my own blood. Instead, my fingers met soft cotton and the tight wrap of a clean bandage. Someone had tended to my wound. He saw where my hand went. He nodded slowly. "You were hurt bad," he said, again in that quiet voice. He pointed to himself. "Jed." Then he pointed to me, his brow furrowed in a question. I stared at him, my mind a whirlwind of fear and grief. Where was Cale? Where was my son, Tata? The memory of the raid came rushing back, not as smoke and noise, but as sharp, clear images. The fallen bodies of my kin. The burning of our homes. The emptiness. A sob broke from my chest, raw and ragged. The life I had known was a pile of ash. I was alone. The pain in my heart was 1,000 times worse than the fire in my side. I turned my face away from him, toward the wooden wall, and let the tears come. I did not want to live in a world without my family. I did not want to live in a cage built by one of their killers. I heard his boots scuff again, and then the sound of him leaving the room. Good. Let him leave me here to die. It was all I had left, but he came back. He carried a tin cup of water. He didn't try to hand it to me. He just set it on the small table by the bed, next to a bowl of something that smelled like broth. Then he retreated to a chair in the corner of the room and sat, just watching. He didn't speak. He just sat, a quiet, steady presence, days blurred into a haze of pain, sleep, and grief. Every time I woke, he was there. Not hovering, not threatening, just there. He would bring food and water, change the bandage on my side with surprisingly gentle hands, his touch firm but respectful. He never looked at my body with shame in his eyes, only with a focused concern for the wound. He would clean it, apply a salve that smelled of pine needles, and wrap it again in fresh cloth. I refused to eat. I would turn my head away from the spoon of broth, the piece of bread. I was starving my body to follow my spirit, which had already died in the ashes of my village. One afternoon, he came in and saw the untouched food. He sighed, a heavy sound of frustration. He ran a hand through his sandy-colored hair. He looked at me, and his eyes, which I could now see were the color of a summer sky, were filled not with anger, but with a deep sadness. He sat on the edge of the bed. I flinched, pulling away, but he didn't try to touch me. "Please," he said, his voice rough with feeling. He picked up the bowl of broth. "You have to eat to get strong." I just shook my head, my long black hair falling across my face. He put the bowl down. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. He started to speak, not to me, but to the floor, to the air. The words were a stream I couldn't understand, but the music of them told a story. His voice was filled with a sorrow that echoed my own. I heard a name, Mary, and another, Little Ben. The way he said them, with a catch in his throat, I knew. He was speaking of his dead. He looked up at me, and I saw tears in his sky-blue eyes. He saw the tears on my cheeks. In that moment, we were not Apache and Cowboy. We were two people, adrift in our own separate oceans of loss. He held out the spoon again. This time, I didn't turn away. I opened my mouth and let the warm, salty broth slide down my throat. It was the first thing I had tasted in days, and it tasted like a small, fragile flicker of life. From that day, something shifted. The fear was still there, a coiled snake in my belly, but it was joined by a flicker of something else. Curiosity. I started to watch him. Jed. His days were a quiet routine. He would rise before the sun, make coffee, and go out to tend to his horse, a big, gentle giant the color of buckskin. I would watch him from the window as I grew stronger. He would talk to the horse, his voice the same low rumble he used with me. He would mend his fences, chop wood, and work with a slow, deliberate pace. He was a man who lived in solitude, and it clung to him like the scent of pine and leather. When I was able to sit up on my own, he brought me one of his shirts to wear. It was huge on me, the soft, worn flannel smelling of him, of soap and wood smoke. It felt strange, but it was clean and warm. One day, he came in from outside holding something in his palm. He held it out to me. Lying in his calloused hand was a small, scorched piece of beadwork. It was mine. A bracelet I had been making for Taza, with blue and white beads in the pattern of a hawk in flight. It was all I had left. I took it from his hand, my fingers trembling. The beads were cool against my skin. I clutched it to my chest and the tears came again, but this time they were different. They were not for the end of a life, but for the memory of it. I looked at him, at this quiet man who had found this tiny piece of my soul in the ruins and thought to save it for me. "Thank you," I whispered. The words were strange in my own language, spoken in this wooden house. He didn't understand the word, but he understood the look in my eyes. He just gave a small, sad smile and a nod. Soon, I was able to walk. I moved stiffly, my side still not of pain, but I could stand. The first time I walked to the door and looked out, the world took my breath away. The cabin was nestled in a small valley, surrounded by tall pines and mountains that clawed at the sky. The air was clean and cold. It was beautiful and empty. Jed taught me words. He would point to things. Water. Fire. Bread. Horse. I would repeat them. My tongue felt clumsy around his sounds. In turn, I would teach him mine. I pointed to the sky. Yeah. To the ground. Nahaztsan. He would try to say them, his voice deep and clumsy, and sometimes, a small smile would touch my lips. We lived in a world of gestures and single words, but we understood each other. I learned that he had built this cabin himself. I learned that his wife and son had died of a fever 2 winters past. He didn't have to tell me in words I could understand. I saw it in the way he looked at the 2 simple graves marked with wooden crosses on the hill behind the cabin. He, too, was the sole survivor of his family. I began to help. I would sweep the wooden floors. I would mend his torn shirts with the needle and thread he gave me. It felt good to do something, to not just be a wounded animal he was caring for. It felt like I was Nalin again, a woman with purpose, even if it was a small 1.1 evening. We sat by the fire, the silence comfortable between us. He was cleaning his rifle. I was running my thumb over the beads of my son's bracelet. I thought of the men who had carried rifles like that one, the men who had destroyed my world. I looked at Jed. He was not like them. He had a gun, but his hands were for healing, for building, for tending. He looked up and caught me watching him. He put the rifle down. "Nalin," he said, my name sounding soft in his mouth. He gestured to the mountains, to the wide world beyond our valley. "Your people, maybe some got away. You could look for them. When you're strong enough." He was offering me my freedom. The thought sent a jolt through me. For weeks, this cabin had been my whole world. The idea of leaving it was terrifying. Where would I go? What if I was the only one left? The thought of being truly alone in the vast wilderness was a cold hand gripping my heart. Here, in this quiet valley with this quiet man, I was not alone. I just shook my head, looking down at my hands. "No people," I said, using one of the few words we both knew. "Gone." He was silent for a long time. Then he just nodded, a deep understanding in his eyes. He didn't push. He accepted my answer. He accepted my presence. The seasons began to turn. The green of summer deepened, then faded to the gold and red of autumn. My wound healed, leaving a puckered scar on my side. My body grew strong again, but my heart was still a fragile thing. We fell into a rhythm, Jed and I. We were 2 solitary ghosts haunting the same small space, finding comfort in each other's quiet company. There was no romance, no touch beyond an accidental brush of hands as he passed me a plate. It was something deeper, a bond forged in shared loss and silent understanding. He gave me a safe place to grieve, and I, perhaps, gave him a reason to keep his own lonely world turning. Then, one crisp autumn afternoon, everything changed. I was outside, gathering pine cones for the fire, when I heard the sound of horses. It wasn't Jed's horse. It was several horses, coming fast. My blood ran cold. I dropped my basket and ran into the cabin. Jed was already at the window, his rifle in his hand. His face was grim. "Get in the bedroom," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Stay down. Don't make a sound." 3 men rode into the clearing. They were rough-looking, with cruel mouths and eyes that scanned the cabin like hungry wolves. They were not soldiers. They were worse. They were men who lived by their own laws, and their laws were written in blood. "Jedediah," one of them shouted, a sneer in his voice. "We know you're in there. We tracked that Apache raiding party. Heard there was a survivor. A woman. You hiding her for yourself?" My heart stopped. "They were looking for me." Jed didn't answer. He just stood by the window, his rifle held steady. "Come on, Jed," the man laughed. "Don't be greedy. We just want to have a little fun. Hand her over, and we'll be on our way." I peeked through a crack. In the bedroom door. I saw Jed's knuckles turn white as he gripped his rifle. I saw the hard line of his jaw. He was one man. They were 3. He would die. And then they would take me. The memory of the raid, of the violence, washed over me. I would not be a victim again. I would not let this good man die for me. I looked around the small bedroom. In the corner was a small axe Jed used for splitting kindling. It was all I had. I grabbed it, its weight feeling familiar and solid in my hand. My heart was a war drum in my chest, but my hands were steady. I crept out of the bedroom just as one of the men was dismounting, a wicked-looking knife in his hand. Jed was focused on the other 2. This one was coming around the side. Jed fired his rifle. One of the men on horseback yelled and clutched his shoulder. The other one returned fire, the bullet splintering the wood of the doorframe next to Jed's head. The man with the knife was at the door now. He kicked it open, his eyes wild and hungry. He saw me and a grin split his filthy face. He took a step toward me. I did not scream. I did not hesitate. I remembered Cale's face, my son's smile. I remembered the strength of my people. I lunged forward, swinging the small axe with all my might. The blade bit deep into his arm, and he held in pain and surprise, dropping the knife. The sound made Jed turn. His eyes widened when he saw me, but there was no time. The 3rd man was charging, firing his pistol. Jed ducked, then fired his rifle again. The man grunted and fell from his horse. The first man, the one Jed had wounded, cursed and spurred his horse, galloping away into the trees. The one I had struck was clutching his arm, blood pouring between his fingers. He looked at me with pure hatred, then scrambled after his friend, disappearing into the woods. Silence fell, broken only by the sound of our ragged breaths and the nervous whinny of Jed's horse. Jed rushed to me. He took the axe from my hand, his fingers gentle on mine. He looked at my face, then at the man's blood on the floor, then back to me. His sky-blue eyes were full of a fierce, protective light I had never seen before. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice shaking slightly. I shook my head. "No." He pulled me into his arms then, a sudden, desperate embrace. He held me tight against his chest, and I could feel the frantic beat of his heart against my ear. I buried my face in his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, and for the first time since I had lost everything, I felt safe. Not just protected, but truly, deeply safe. We stood like that for a long time, in the middle of his cabin, with the evidence of violence all around us. When he finally let me go, he kept his hands on my shoulders, looking down at me. "Nalin," he said. His voice thick. He stopped, unable to find the words. I understood. I placed my hand over his heart. It was still beating fast. "Jed," I said. It was enough. That night, the quiet of the cabin was different. It was not the silence of 2 lonely people existing in the same space. It was the shared silence of 2 people who had fought for each other, who had protected each other. 2 people who had forged a new family out of the ashes of their old ones. We sat by the fire, but this time, he sat on the floor next to my chair. He took my hand, his large, rough palm enclosing mine. He didn't say anything. He just held it, tracing the lines on my skin with his thumb. I looked at our hands, his pale and calloused, mine brown and slender. We were from different worlds, born to be enemies. But life, in its cruelty and its mercy, had torn down those worlds and left us here, together. I thought my life was over in the smoke and fire of that terrible day. I thought my story had ended. But as I sat there, in the warm glow of the fire, holding the hand of this quiet cowboy, I knew that wasn't true. My old life was gone, a ghost that would always walk beside me. But a new one had begun. It had begun. The moment I opened my eyes in a cowboy's bed and found not an enemy, but a man with a sorrow as deep as my own. It wasn't the life I would have chosen, but it was a life nonetheless. A life of quiet days and shared silence. A life of healing. And as Jed squeezed my hand, I squeezed back, knowing, finally, that I was home.